A world financial crisis we hoped we'd never see again. 80 years on, are we facing another depression that could last for years?
Riots, internal dissent and fracture, those are things which we would expect to come with this.
The euro crisis deepens. Ties with old allies are strained. Deep divisions. Britain out on its own.
What is on offer isn't in Britain's interests.
We live in historic times as huge questions surface about our future with Europe. At home, living standards are falling, destroying lives and hope.
I've got a family to support, an house to keep, a roof to keep over my head.
But is there a new route back to prosperity? New markets to be exploited, new jobs to be created?
If British businesses don't follow those markets abroad, then they're going to miss out, but there may be the difference between thriving and surviving or even dying.
As storm clouds gather, tonight we investigate what we must do to drive Britain back to prosperity. There's been a lot of talk of how bad things are, talk of recession, depression, and now isolation from Europe. There's been less talk on how to solve the problems. So I'm going on a mission to discover how we can steer the economy through these troubled times. It's not going to be easy, but the outcome will affect us all. You may find my starting place surprising. A primary school in London. We're going through the biggest squeeze on living standards for decades. There's talk of a lost generation. But here they're trying to fight the gloom. They're preparing the children for a different kind of future.
You don't have to be brilliant to realise that Europe's in a mess and that the growing emerging economies are not European economies. So therefore it seemed ill-advised to focus one's modern foreign language teaching solely on Europe.
Their teachers want them to learn a Chinese language spoken by over 1 billion people, a people whose economy and culture will increasingly dominate our lives.
China is a rising power, and it's courteous, apart from anything else, if you're doing business with a power, to be able to at least greet and meet people in Mandarin. It needs to be taught regularly and consistently throughout a child's school, starting right now in reception. Difficult challenge.
Difficult though it is, it's a challenge worth taking on. It could be essential if future British generations are to benefit from the shift in global power.
Chang Su De Mao Mao Mao.
We can't just look at schools for solutions. We need to look in the workplace as well.
Calculating your route.
So I'm taking a journey to the heartland of British manufacturing. This is what Britain used to do well. Manufacturing was the engine of the nation's economic growth.
This train was built here in Derby in 1956, but in fact, the relationship between industry and rail in Derby goes back a lot further than that, to the 1800s. They still make trains here, and a lot of people are fighting hard to ensure that rail is an industry here, not just a tourist attraction.
manufacturing is still at the heart of the economy in the Midlands. Bombardier's train factory in Derby plays a big part in the local economy. This is where they make the trains for London Underground and for some of the biggest mainline rail operators in the country. It's also the last train manufacturer in Britain. Paul Smith is one of the 3,000 people who still work here.
Look to shunt them. You're going to take Stuart on there with you?
Well, we're down to a one-man job on it now.
I like everything about the job. It's really demanding, challenging, and it really pushes you hard to try and achieve.
Back in March, the Cabinet came to Derby. Manufacturing, they declared, was once again going to be our path to prosperity.
Fundamental question: what is it that we?
Derby is a great example of what the British economy should be in the future, which is a series of manufacturing businesses that export around the world.
Those comments raised huge hopes amongst the 3,000 workers at Bombardier. But the news which came out just weeks later meant their joy was short-lived.
This morning's dawn didn't bring warmth for the workers at Bombardier's Derby factory.
More than 1,400 job losses.
The government awarded a massive contract to build new trains for the Thameslink route, not to Bombardier in Derby, but to Siemens in Germany.
I think it's disgraceful. I just cannot understand how they can justify spending £1.4 billion of British taxpayers' money to boost the German economy. I just can't understand that.
After losing the contract, 1,400 jobs are going at this factory. Paul Smith has just been told his job is one of them.
Emotionally, it's draining and I feel awful, still shaking and whatnot. I've got a family to support.
And what was it like going home and telling your wife that?
It was horrendous, horrendous. All sorts of thoughts were going through my mind. What am I going to do next? What future have I got? I may end up losing my house or, you know, all those kind of things. It's almost like they're shutting down Britain.
Manufacturing
matters big time, yeah. Yeah.
Do you think the politicians understand that?
No, not at all.
The government said it had no choice. It had to get best value for money for the contract. But giving the German economy a helping hand might seem strange. Germany will now be making our new trains. Of course, they already make many of our cars.
The Mini, for instance, is a brand that Britain invented. Now, the cars are still manufactured here, but the company which makes them is BMW of Germany.
Britain seems to have lost control of its manufacturing industry. Manufacturing used to be a third of our economy. Now it's slumped to about a tenth. In its place, newer, flashier, younger-feeling businesses took over. We no longer had to manufacture, the argument went. Instead, we turned to the city to provide the nation's wealth. And all went well, for a while.
Are you taking me? Are you asking me?
But the credit crunch and recession destroyed much of that dream.
Just how serious the crash has been for our economy was made clear by last month's gloomy economic forecasts. It painted a picture of an economy which, far from bouncing back, was actually on the edge of another recession.
And that's why the debate about manufacturing and the makeup of our economy is centre stage once again.
I don't think we can exist just from the city. I don't think you can exist just with services. I don't think you can exist just flipping hamburgers. Manufacturing employs people and could employ more people. It used to employ 6.5 million people, it employs barely 2 million now.
Ironically, to create new economic growth, we may have to return to an older economic model, one in which we actually make a lot more things.
Turn left in 100 yards.
Manufacturing was our past. Could it also be a future destination? The fortunes of this company echo the rise and fall of Britain's manufacturing industry. When our industry led the world, this was one of the most successful products of its kind. And made in Britain still sells.
I'm at one of the most famous parts of Derby's industrial history, Royal Crown Derby. They've been making pottery here for about 260 years. They made it for the Titanic. They made the most expensive plate ever in the world, and they are about to make a new range, and I'm going to help them. This is Tim, my instructor. Hi, Tim.
Hi,
right, where do we start?
Start by cutting a piece of plate.
This may look simple, but not for me. To survive in a world dominated by cheaper labour in the Far East, British manufacturers have had to go upmarket.
Oh my word, that looks like this might work.
The buzzword is quality. No cheap crockery here.
It's a plate! Everybody, it's my plate. And this is where the process all ends, as the plate comes out of the kiln. And if this doesn't save British industry, I don't know what will.
For the local MP, protecting manufacturing is no laughing matter.
I do genuinely believe that manufacturing has a vitally important role to play in the recovery of the UK economy. By putting all of our eggs in the financial services basket, it meant that when the crash arrived, the resilience of the country was severely impaired, and as a consequence, I think we've suffered much more severely than other countries like Germany, for example, that continued to invest in its manufacturing base.
A few miles away is JCB, a genuine British manufacturing success story. It employs 10,000 people.
These are JCB backhoe loaders. That's a digger to you and me, and from here at their base in Staffordshire, they're exported throughout the world.
3/4 of all JCB's machines are sold abroad. They sell to 150 countries. They're the most popular diggers of their kind in the world. For JCB, it's all about exports. So, should we rebuild our economy like JCB has built its business?
We went to India 30 years ago. We used to sell 50 machines a year and then 100 machines a year. Last year we did, I think it's 27,000 machines in India. And now really our whole world is on market, and particularly Far East, India, even the Middle East.
Unlike JCB, almost half of British exports go to Europe. And Europe, of course, is in deep crisis. Europe today, crippled by debt, riots on the streets, British taxpayers on the hook for billions of pounds of loans and guarantees just to help bail out the euro. The troubles in the Eurozone are also stifling its economic growth, and that's bad news for our companies trying to sell their goods to a recession-hit continent.
Well, welcome to my world. This is where we make structural steelwork for projects all around the UK.
Sid Pepper has been in the steel industry for over 40 years. Like many small businesses in Britain, he's suffered firsthand from the ongoing crisis in Europe.
Well, the biggest fear is this uncertainty has the potential to cause serious problems with small companies like myself. But a lot of work in the UK now is carried out by companies which are owned and run from Europe, and they're being cautious, putting a hold on projects. Can I employ these guys this week? Will they get a wage back at the end of the week? It's as fundamental and as simple as that.
He believes it's political ineptitude which is damaging British business.
While they're messing around in Europe, we have to continue. I really wish they'd get it sorted, though, because we're going to be limited. I can only keep pushing the boundaries a little bit at a time.
Just 4 days ago, European leaders met. Desperate to save the euro, 26 countries agreed to try to strengthen their ties. David Cameron refused to sign Britain up, saying it would stop our ability to defend our financial services industry.
What is on offer isn't in Britain's interests, so I didn't agree to it.
Critics, even within the coalition, claim that position has isolated Britain and undermined our relationship with our biggest export markets.
I am bitterly disappointed by the outcome. I think there is now a real danger that over time the United Kingdom will be isolated and marginalised within the European Union.
We are going to be now excluded from key economic decisions that will affect our country in the future.
Clearly a manufacturing company further north in England will think first about the single market. We don't want to be marginalised from that single market.
That's not a risk we're running, claims the government.
We are still members of the European Union. We have access to the single market. But the deal that was offered to David Cameron in the early hours of Friday morning was one that was not in our national interest, didn't protect our interests, and therefore the Prime Minister was absolutely right to say that he wouldn't sign up to it.
He may be right. People may even agree with you. But surely, even so, there is a cost to damaging that relationship.
Well, the fact is that we do trade a lot with the European Union, but that is, you know, individual businesses and customers trading with individual businesses and customers elsewhere. We want access to European markets, and it's right that European businesses have access to our markets, and that will continue.
The markets remain worried. Indeed, many in the financial world think that at best Europe is tying itself into years of austerity. At worst, the euro could collapse.
It cannot sustain itself. It's not competitive, it can't pay its debt off, and so whether it's the periphery going first or the core knocking the periphery out, it's inevitable that Europe will collapse. The politicians are just buying time. There's nothing that can be done unless you create proper growth through stimulation that can move yourself out of this type of crisis.
So let's be clear, you think the euro, and indeed the EU as an institution, will end?
Absolutely. It's inevitable.
Some believe a collapse of the euro will cost Britain billions. If Europe declines, we'll have to look for new opportunities further afield.
Please find alternative routes.
This is Picture Postcard England. Rolling hills, babbling brooks, the church spire, and a Downton Abbey-style manor house at the heart of the village. But this most English of settings is the backdrop for a photo shoot with a twist. The internet children's clothing company, miniwardrobe.com, is preparing to unveil its latest collection.
We're looking today to market these products beyond the British consumer to consumers overseas. We're taking British products in Britain and making them appealing to customers all over the world.
It's no coincidence that this business has chosen an international look for its models. These children represent exactly the new emerging markets the company wants to export to.
British businesses don't follow those markets abroad, then they're going to miss out. But there may be the difference between thriving and surviving, or even, dying in this climate. So you've got to be out there.
1, 2, 3.
What could fuel this company's growth and power Britain back to prosperity is a business idea based on the biggest global social change that has happened in hundreds of years.
We think we are probably less than a quarter of the way through the most remarkable growth of middle classes on a global basis that the world will have seen for certainly many decades, if not centuries. We reckon by 2005, through for the next 30 years, there will be 3 billion people entering the global middle class. This is extraordinary.
These extraordinary places are collectively known as the BRIC countries. That's short for Brazil, Russia, India, and of course, China. I experienced this incredible growth firsthand when I was recently in China. Hundreds of millions of potential new middle-class customers for Britain's ailing economy.
Over the next decade, their likely growth will be about the same as another one of them today, so another 13 trillion. And that will be close, if not more than double, the likely contribution to global GDP, double of the US and Europe put together.
China is a very, very large market for European brands, including clothes, fashion products, watches, and even automobiles. China right now is the second largest market for BMW, for Audi, for Mercedes.
So the gold rush is on. But if we're going to win here in China, are we doing enough?
Germany now exports more to the BRICS than it does to France. Here in the UK, by contrast, if you add all the BRICS together, we export about the same to them as we do to Ireland. And Ireland isn't our most important export market.
Earlier this year, the Chinese Premier came to the UK. We thought we'd done well getting around £1.5 billion worth of deals. But only the next day, he went to Germany, and they announced almost £10 billion worth of deals. It made our attempts at breaking into this market look rather feeble.
China, Brazil, India, these are countries which are growing and investing. If we have lost years of high unemployment and no investment now, if we lose the race to the new technologies, to the new industries, we'll never ever catch up again. That's why I think it's so important to act now, to get our economy moving, to get businesses confident, and to start investing where the new jobs are going to come from.
For a long time, there has been a bit of a missed opportunity here. We haven't been exporting as much to the likes of India and China as we might have done.
Steering our economy towards the newer growth societies is going to take time. Time we don't have. So in addition to a long-term strategy, we also need a quick fix. In the past, we've turned to the government to spend our way out of recession.
It's hoped that major infrastructure projects like this will provide a much-needed boost to the economy. Now, this is the redevelopment of the King's Cross mainline station in London, and they're ploughing some £400 million into the site.
This project is fully publicly funded, signed off in times of plenty. We no longer have that kind of money. Our budget deficit is the second largest in the EU. So rather than spending our way out of trouble, the government's taking the axe to public spending. But by cutting too much, are they undermining hopes of a quick recovery?
In the 19th century, the 18th century, doctors thought if you cut patients and let them bleed, that would make them better. It was quack medicine. This government still thinks more cuts and more bleeding will make things better. This economy, this patient, they need a tonic, they need an antibiotic, they need a lift, and then you need a long-term plan to get the patient fit and healthy again. We've not got that, we've just got cuts, cuts, cuts.
I think the risks, if we ignore our deficit, if we just say we can keep on borrowing in the way that we were, are enormous. The easy thing might be to just sort of pretend that we don't have a problem. We do have a problem with the deficit, but if we can address it, then we will see strong growth in future.
It's 12 days to Christmas, and despite the attempts at cheer, the tough times are taking a real toll. In Derby, Paul Smith and his son are out Christmas shopping. He's facing a new year without work.
We've had to tighten our belts a lot because of not knowing the future events. We can't go out and spend as much as we would do at a normal Christmas because of what's happening. I'm extremely angry, unbelievably let down. I feel I've still got a hell of a lot to give. I've got 30 years left to give to the system. I've always worked and incredibly upset.
For Paul and people like him, the economy needs a quick solution. But it takes time to develop new markets. It takes time to pay back our debt. So some experts are calling for a more radical package now to kickstart growth.
Wouldn't it be great if very small businesses paid no tax at all on their profits up to a certain level, and if up to another certain level, assuming they were actually growing, they could pay only 10% or something like that? You can also bring in, I think, quite large tax cuts for lower paid workers. So that includes the consumption tax. You can cut VAT very, very heavily if you want to have an effect.
Right, how much would you suggest?
Well, 1%, 2% doesn't really have any actual effect. So I think you'd have to make a 10% cut in VAT if you really wanted people to start spending.
The government says that the economy can't afford tax cuts. Nothing is more important than getting the deficit down.
If we don't take those difficult decisions, if we don't have credibility in our fiscal plans, then in the long term we leave ourselves in a very, very dangerous position. And yes, there are times when governments will be unpopular, but the important thing is that we do the right thing for the country in the long run.
Preparing our children for a different economic future is a big step. To grow, some say we're going to need to rebalance our economy and find new markets abroad.
We face an absolutely defining crisis, and you can stick your head in the sand and your bottom in the air and think it isn't there, but we're in it.
I don't think that as a population we've really yet grasped our problem. There is something very wrong with our economy, that it's very badly balanced, that it's in the wrong place, that we need to do something dramatic to move it into a different place.
That place is not familiar. Getting there won't be easy. We'll have to make some big decisions if we're to secure our children's future prosperity. And on Wednesday at 9, The Truth About Adoption. We follow 6 children waiting for a new family.
It's gonna take ages.
Why does it take so long? And with thousands of children in care, why are so few being adopted?
After weeks of competition, it's time for Lord Sugar to hire his young apprentice. The final is next on BBC One. On 2, Life After Talent shows meet the people who had the X Factor 25 years ago. Or on 3, the woman with Tourette's who swears that she can sing.